Cool.
Thanks, Phantom Voice.
Thank you, Siri.
Let's see. Start the presentation. Come on, focus the windows.
Siri's actually been a bit of an asshole lately. I think the update, the latest update, 14.5, if you're on iOS, made Siri way more. I don't know, what's the word? Gave it way more initiative, maybe. So it's trying everything, and nothing's working for us.
That's a little terrifying, actually.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
But
Can't do
the
that,
voice
Dave.
is smarter. Sorry, Brian, what'd you say?
I can't do that, Dave.
Yeah.
How? I cannot open the pod doors. Flip it around. All right, so I will begin by saying I am on the Tsleil-Waututh, which has been unceded in traditional land occupied and taken often violently by the Southern nation of Canada. And I'm invited to guests on this land, and I pledge to learn and do what I'm able to do to support the nation, the people of land that live and work upon. And I invite you to share either in the Discord if you're watching this later, or right now where you are calling in from. And if you don't know that, native-land.ca is a really good resource for this. I thought it would be important to put Ryan at the stack of the book so he could feel like he was just as cool.
Thanks.
But yeah, I'll talk for like 10, 15 minutes. And then, yeah, the rest of us will chat and we'll see how that goes.
Mm-hmm.
So last time on Denise Bedford, we learned about, okay, hit the right slide. Okay, when early made case for knowledge architecture. There were so many lists, and that didn't really get better this time around, and I'm sorry for that, but it does soon, I promise. The book, the first chapter, I guess, really asked like one is the case for knowledge architecture. And she said that everyone, philosophy, communications, HR people, everybody had different definitions of knowledge. So she summarized by asking really, what is knowledge? And she said, market appreciation. I think I mixed my slides up. So anyways, there we go.
Roll with it.
Knowledge is abundant, not scarce, therefore not competitive. Knowledge is experience good and public good, and there's cost associated, and the rest of that. I won't go too deeply into that because we talked about that a lot more the first time. I did make some slides up, but here we go. So talking about coffee, and I actually don't even like coffee, but I had to go and get coffee because I talked about it so much in this presentation already. And Ryan talked to us about all the different types of making coffee and kinds of how we can know things. So this leads us to chapter 3 and 4, which is knowledge architecture and design and knowledge reference model, the terribly exciting titles. But I do think this quote here really stuck out to me on I think it's page 53 or thereabouts, about how knowledge, the landscape doesn't really work anymore. And I think we know that. We've all experienced that to some extent, whether it's being completely overwhelmed by too many social media platforms or news, or I mean, I think it's always happened in history and time, but I think it's become harder and more complicated. And at least the technologies we've been using, which are for the most part based in like way back in the book history era, right? Like Wikipedia, like the encyclopedias from the 1700s. So the models that we're having are really pushing up to the limits of what they can do for us. And of course, we have the graphics, lots of graphics, some of them better, I think a little bit better this time. This is the one I think was really when I started to feel like I was getting a grasp of what was going on, but I wanted to break it down a little bit further. So she presents these different categories, and she says, this is basically how a traditional model runs. Where would we place knowledge architecture in this? And she gives three things, but the first one is, she said, we can make a new layer. We can put knowledge architecture right in between human resources and information, just making its own thing, developing out that way. We could combine it with human resources and information and just rename it knowledge. And that's a fair approach. or we could just rename the HR layer as knowledge, given the hefty focus on people as a knowledge asset. So this is what she's really signaling. This is the rest of the book right here is going to take place in between these two things. But there's something else on the chart, and I just don't think it's well designed, because I think you split it up this way, it makes a lot more sense why the title of the book is the title of the book, and why she's focusing on the things she's focusing on. She's saying that knowledge is all of these things, right? It's how we run businesses, how we do performance, how we get better. And that all rests on these other things, the architecture of businesses, of programs, of technology. I saw this, I think it's like an SKCD comic, and it was like showing, it's like has all these skyscrapers and stuff, and it says something to the effect of like all modern web technology, and it's propped up by this little book, which is supported by this one piece of programming that somebody wrote in 1977. That's the curl programming language, which, if you know programming, it's you need curl to do anything. So it's just some dude in Sweden who makes curl, and it kind of falls apart without it.
Mhm.
And then there's these things. She talks about it, cake and pie and layers. And again, I just don't think they make much sense. So I just decided to remake them to make them make more sense. First off, I think she just have to flip the whole thing around. If you're trying to teach, like this one might make sense to talk about if you're talking about everything from top down. But if you're trying to explain something, you should really start from the bottom and go up, because it just makes more sense when you start thinking about it in more specific ways. So if you start thinking about it like, okay, so fire is a technology that humans invented, right? And they applied it to cooking animals. And they got information that certain animals were better and certain animals were worse, and certain plants would kill you and certain wouldn't. And that gave them the knowledge, which they could then develop to, I guess, work on herd animals and so on and so forth. And I don't know if anybody was selling stone clubs out of their caves back in Stonehenge, but maybe they had businesses in performance ratios, or at least we had it as a society. And each of these layers, of course, is split up, which is the other thing that she doesn't really do a great job of explaining, that each of these layers has availability, accessibility, and consumability, which are the three really sections of how the cake is put together, I guess. And I guess these three things are the things that we should really remember going forward and thinking about how this is set up. And then, I mean, again, just like another one of these, which is, I don't know. I'm not sure how I'm supposed to read it. And once I started to take apart the text and think about like how she might have structured it the way she structured it, I found that she didn't. The things were just out of order, really. That if you think about it this way, as a flow, again, like trying to make the diagrams here work for us, think about it as a flow, it makes a lot more sense. So like I was saying about, let's do a different example. So activities, the book club, we're gonna have a book club. Okay, one of the tasks for that, we're gonna set a time and a date, and our inputs might be the book. We might need an e-reader if we have a digital format. Who the actors might be people who are in part of the club, and the outputs are, who knows, like knowledge, hopefully. But I thought about last week, and I was like, we should do coffee. And if you're making coffee, right, you need to heat the water and pour it into this. If you're using whatever that is, I have an AeroPress, I don't know what that is. But you can't just think about that.
Just a pour over, I think.
Thank you. You
Mhm.
have to think about the coffee where it's from, and of course, like all the packaging and heating and cooking that it takes to get here, and of course the transport, which is also just a whole legend in itself. I don't think it's passion though. I think it's actually just capitalism. And then you need your grinders, and if you have a fancy espresso machine, you need one of those, and that's your resource and your tools. And then I saw these on Twitter, and I could not get over the fact that these were real drinks that people had ordered. Yeah, so yeah, those are your roles and actors. I guess your poor Starbucks barista, who is, I don't even know how many things are on there. And of course, hopefully by the end of all that, you have a nice little coffee. So that's maybe, yes, here we go. That's really kind of the arc of chapter 3 and 4, kind of boiled down as much as I could really think about it in a way. And at the end of chapter 4, I think maybe she just drops this. And I'm like, oh, we should have started the book with this because it makes a lot more sense. And it begins to come together, I think. So yeah, I will leave it there. And yeah, we can talk for however long we would like. Let me just stop this. Where is the record button?